He said, you haven't been sober long enough. You need to stay sober at least a year before you can sponsor someone. Where does it say that in our book? It has been my experience that if it is not in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, it is not Alcoholics Anonymous. Can you imagine what it would have been like when Bill Wilson carried the message of hope to Dr. Bob, and Dr. Bob said, by the way, how long have you been sober? We wouldn't be here. You know how long Dr. Bob was sober when he carried the message to the first suffering alcoholic? 2 days. He was sober 2 days. Dr. Bob typically took people through the steps in 2 days. See, they were dealing with people who came in with the desperation of a drowning man. See, I'm the real alcoholic that we're going to be talking about today. I'm not a hard drinker. I'm a real alcoholic. What that means is I need to get through the steps very quickly. I need to get through them now because I need to get to that power because I have no power to stay sober. And my sponsor, thankfully, understood that. So he took me through the steps very quickly. And then cut me loose and said, okay, now go out and start taking other people through the steps. And I was so afraid. I was going to kill someone. He said, you have experience. With what? On how to take the 12 steps. You've had a spiritual awakening. The compulsion to drink was removed for me. And for those of you that are new, that are going through the steps and you keep wondering when the spiritual experience or spiritual awakening is going to happen for you, just stop and ask yourself this. Do you have a compulsion to drink?
So those basic relationships with God, self, and others had been totally destroyed. Most alcoholics coming in here are bankrupt in those three areas. It's got nothing to do with finance. It has to do with spiritual bankruptcy in those three primary areas. When I took another look at the 12 steps by design, steps 1 through 3 recreate and develop a relationship with God. Steps 4 through 7 by design recreate and develop a relationship with self. Steps 8 and 9 recreate and develop a relationship with others. 10 maintains my relationship with self, 11 maintains my relationship with God, and 12 maintains my relationship with others. So coming out of the steps, I'm able to live in harmony in those basic, simple relationships. God, self, and others. There was a great spiritual teacher. He was asked, what's the most important thing of all your teachings? He said, love God with all thy heart and love thy neighbor as thyself. The three relationships are built right into these steps. They've been here since the beginning of time. But if you're a real alcoholic and God scares you out of these rooms, don't worry about it. Alcohol will scare you right back in.
This is the foreword, as it appeared in the first printing of the first edition in 1939. We of Alcoholics Anonymous are more than 100 men and women who have recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. To show other alcoholics precisely how we have recovered is the main purpose of this book. For them, we hope these pages will prove so convincing that no further authentication will be necessary. But the ex-problem drinker who has found this solution, who is properly armed with facts about himself, can generally win the entire confidence of another alcoholic in a few hours. Until such an understanding is reached, little or nothing can be accomplished.
And hearing a lot of drama in meetings and not being able to relate. So let's say I'm brand new. I'm sitting in the back of the room. And this guy's going on and on about all the drama. He talks about being in prison. He talks about having 3 divorces. He wrecked 6 cars and filed bankruptcy. So I'm a newcomer back there, and this is what I'm hearing. Let's see. I've never been to prison. I've never been married. I've never wrecked a car. I've never filed bankruptcy. Maybe I'm really not an alcoholic. And he walks out the door, and we've just lost him. I find that drama creates a lot of distance. It does not create relatedness. That's the stuff we talk about over coffee, to amuse each other. But that's not what I do in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm there to carry a vision of hope. and to share my inner experience.
Beaten into complete defeat by alcohol, confronted by the living proof of release, and surrounded by those who can speak to us from the heart, we have finally surrendered. And then, paradoxically, we have found ourselves in a new dimension, the real world of spirit and faith. Enough willingness, enough open-mindedness, and there it is.
Actually, we were fooling ourselves, for deep down in every man, woman, and child is the fundamental idea of God. It may be obscured by calamity, by pomp, by worship of other things, but in some form or other it is there. For faith in a power greater than ourselves, and miraculous demonstrations of that power in human lives, are facts as old as man himself. We finally saw that faith in some kind of God was a part of our makeup, just as much as the feeling we have for a friend. Sometimes we had to search fearlessly, but he was there. He was as much a fact as we were. We found the great reality deep down within us. In the last analysis, it is only there that he may be found. It was so with us.
Page 16, we're going to read the ABCs. The ABCs on page 60. A, that we were alcoholic and could not manage our own lives. B, that probably no human power could have relieved our alcoholism. C, that God could and would if he were sought. Let's turn those into questions. Now we're going to make a shift. Now the authors are asking me, do I believe? So ask these questions of yourself. Do you believe you're an alcoholic? Do you believe you can't manage your own life? Do you believe no human power can relieve your alcoholism? Do you believe that God could and would if you seek him out? In the very next line, the authors say, being convinced, we were at step 3. Which is that we decided to turn our will and our life over to God as we understood him. Just what do we mean by that, and just what do we do? Being convinced of what? Well, convinced of the ABCs. Let's ask that question. Are you convinced that you're an alcoholic? Are you convinced that you can't manage your own life? Are you convinced that no human power can relieve your alcoholism? Are you convinced that only God can if you seek him out?
I am responsible. When anyone, anywhere, reaches out for help, I want the hand of AA always to be there. And for that, I am responsible. The Responsibility Declaration was written by Al S., a former Grapevine editor and trustee of Alcoholics Anonymous for the 1965 International Convention held in Toronto. Bill W. expanded on the theme in an essay called Responsibility is Our Theme for the July 1965 Grapevine. It became a regular feature of the Grapevine shortly thereafter. This goes hand in hand with the fifth tradition. The long form says each Alcoholics Anonymous group ought to be a spiritual entity having but one primary purpose, that of carrying its message to the alcoholic who still suffers.
On awakening, let us think about the 24 hours ahead. We consider our plans for the day. Before we begin, we ask God to direct our thinking, especially asking that it be divorced from self-pity, dishonest, or self-seeking motives. Under these conditions, we can employ our mental faculties with assurance, for after all, God gave us brains to use. Our thought life will be placed on a much higher plane when our thinking is cleared of wrong motives.
Guidance I receive in meditation that is selfish, dishonest, resentful, or fearful is clearly guidance that came from me. Guidance that I receive in meditation, which is unselfish, honest, pure, and loving, I can be assured came from God.
Alcoholics Anonymous, Chapter 8, to Wives, page 118, paragraph 4. Another feeling we are very likely to entertain is one of resentment that love and loyalty could not cure our husbands of alcoholism. We do not like the thought that the contents of a book or the work of another alcoholic has accomplished in a few weeks that for which we struggled for years. At such moments we forget that alcoholism is an illness over which we could not possibly have had any power.
Son, whose nickname is Smitty, and who was a teenager at the time, explains that Bill became a guest in his parents' home.
After Bill and Dr. Bob met, Bill came to our house and lived for 3 months. You know, both Bill and Dr. Bob were tall, thin Yankees. Bill was quite a bit younger than Dr. Bob. Bill was garrulous. He loved to talk to people. He met people well. He loved to be around people. Bill was a visionary and a promoter. Bill could see further up the road than any human I've ever known. Dr. Bob, although he also was a tall, thin Vermonter, was the opposite temperament. He was steady. He didn't have a lot to say. And I think these two fit together perfectly. You know, if any two of us are alike, one of us is unnecessary. So these two, who were totally different and totally opposite, never had an argument. And Dr. Bob, as I said, is a man of very few words, and when he did speak, he had thought things over
A
pretty
full and
quickly.
thankful heart. One exercise that I practice is to try for a full inventory of my blessings and then for a right acceptance of the many gifts that are mine, both temporal and spiritual. Here I try to achieve a state of joyful gratitude. When such a brand of gratitude is repeatedly affirmed and pondered, it can finally displace the natural tendency to congratulate myself on whatever progress I may have been enabled to make in some areas of living. I try to hold fast to the truth that a full and thankful heart cannot entertain great conceits. When brimming with gratitude, one's heartbeat must surely result in outgoing love, the finest emotion that we can ever know. Grapevine, March 1962. Whose responsibility? An AA group, as such, cannot take on all the personal problems of its members, let alone those of non-alcoholics, in the world around us. The AA group is not, for example, a mediator of domestic relations, nor does it furnish personal financial aid to anyone. Though a member may sometimes be helped in such matters by his friends in AA, the primary responsibility for the solutions of all his problems of living and growing rests squarely upon the individual, himself. Should an AA group attempt this sort of help, its effectiveness and energies would be hopelessly dissipated. This is why sobriety, freedom from alcohol, through the teaching and practice of AA's 12 steps, is the sole purpose of the group. If we don't stick to this cardinal principle, we shall almost certainly collapse. And if we collapse, we cannot help anyone. Letter, 1966. Dr. Bob and the Good Old Timers. Chapter 6. Two Alcoholics Meet. In Alcoholics Anonymous, published almost exactly 4 years after their first meeting, Dr. Bob noted that Bill was a man who had been cured by the very means I had been trying to employ, that is to say, the spiritual approach. He gave me information about the subject of alcoholism which was undoubtedly helpful. Of far more importance, he continued, was the fact that he was the first living human with whom I had ever talked who knew what he was talking about in regard to alcoholism from actual experience. In other words, He talked my language. He knew all the answers, and certainly not because he picked them up on his reading. Whatever Bill said, and in the course of some 5 hours of conversation, he must have thrown in everything he ever knew or thought or guessed about alcoholism, and told the long version of his story to boot. Bob stopped drinking immediately. Each morning, there was a devotion, he recalled. After a long silence, in which they awaited inspiration and guidance, and would read from the Bible. James was our favorite, he said. Reading from her chair in the corner, she would softly conclude, "Faith without works is dead." This was a favorite quotation of Anne's, much as the book of James was a favorite with early AA, so much so that the James Club was favored by some as a name for the fellowship. Sue also remembered the quiet time in the mornings, how they sat around reading from the Bible. Later, they also used the Upper Room, a Methodist publication that provided a daily inspirational message, interdenominational in its approach. Then somebody said a prayer, she recalled. After that, we were supposed to say one ourselves. Then we'd be quiet. Finally, everybody would share what they got, or didn't get. This lasted for at least a half hour and sometimes went as long as an hour. Alcoholics Anonymous, Chapter 5, How It Works, page 62. Selfishness, self-centeredness. That, we think, is the root of our troubles. Driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity, we step on the toes of our fellows and they retaliate. Sometimes they hurt us, seemingly without provocation, but we invariably find that at some time in the past we have made decisions based on self which later placed us in a position to be hurt. So our troubles, we think, are basically of our own making. They arise out of ourselves, and the alcoholic is an extreme example of self will run riot, though he usually doesn't think so. Above everything, we alcoholics must be rid of this selfishness. We must, or it kill us. God makes that possible. And there often seems no way of entirely getting rid of self without His aid. Step 2. Came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Chapter 4, We Agnostics, page 47. Do I now believe, or am I even willing to believe, that there is a power greater than myself? Chapter 4, We Agnostics, page 53. When we became alcoholics, crushed by a self-imposed crises we could not postpone or evade, we had to fearlessly face the proposition that either God is everything or else He is nothing. God either is or He isn't. What was our choice to be? End quote. You get your sanity back in Step 10. Chapter 7, Into Action, page 84. And we have ceased fighting anything or anyone, even alcohol. For by this time sanity will have returned. Alcoholics Anonymous, page 84. This thought brings us to Step 10, which suggests we continue to take personal inventory and continue to set right any new mistakes as we go along. We vigorously commenced this way of living as we cleaned up the past. We have entered the world of the Spirit. Our next function is to grow in understanding and effectiveness. This is not an overnight matter. It should continue for our lifetime. Continue to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. When these crop up, we ask God at once to remove them. We discuss them with someone immediately and make amends quickly if we have harmed anyone. Then we resolutely turn our thoughts to someone we can help. Love and tolerance of others is our code. The Little Red Book, an orthodox interpretation of the 12 steps of the Alcoholics Anonymous program, page 58. The purpose of taking a moral inventory is to expose the harmful character traits of our alcoholic personalities, to eliminate them from the new personalities that with the help of the Alcoholics Anonymous program as a way of life, we now propose to develop. The AA usage of the term personality deals with the development of new character traits necessary to our recovery from alcoholism. It has no relation to personal magnetism emanating from physical health, beauty or charm. We gauge AA personality by AA maturity that is evidenced by such qualities as strength and understanding from a power greater than ourselves, surrender of self-centeredness, the practice of honesty, humility, appreciation, forgiveness, promptness in admitting wrongs, making amends, service to others, and the example of a happy sober life. Page 69. In other words, we treat sex as we would any other problem in meditation. We ask God what we should do about each specific matter. The right answer will come, if we want it. Page 83. So we clean house with the family, asking each morning in meditation that our Creator show us the way of patience, tolerance, kindliness and love. The spiritual life is not a theory. We have to live it. Page 164. God will constantly disclose more to you and to us. Ask Him in your morning meditation what you can do each day for the man who is still sick. The answers will come, if your own house is in order. But obviously you cannot transmit something you haven't got. See to it that your relationship with Him is right, and great events will come to pass for you and countless others. This is the great fact for us. We, of Alcoholics Anonymous, are more than 100 men and women who have recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. To show other alcoholics precisely how we have recovered is the main purpose of this book. Alcoholics Anonymous, page 29. Further on, clear-cut directions are given showing how we recovered. These are followed by 43 personal experiences. Each individual, in the personal stories, describes in his own language and from his own point of view the way he established his relationship with God. These give a fair cross-section of our membership and a clear-cut idea of what has actually happened in their lives. We hope no one will consider these self-revealing accounts in bad taste. Our hope is that many alcoholic men and women, desperately in need, will see these pages, and we believe that it is only by fully disclosing ourselves and our problems that they will be persuaded to say, "Yes, I am one of them too. I must have this thing."
We have a program, and if people will accept this program, it's foolproof. You can't ever drink again if you accept and apply the AA program. It's impossible. I don't sponsor new people anymore. I don't have the time. But I have people, when I do find a new person, I usually turn him over to someone who I've talked to before and taken through the steps and let them work on them. They need that exercise. But what I get is this. I get people who have been around AA or in AA. Some have been dry, some of them haven't, over a period of years. And they hear about this nut down in Castleberry, Florida, who has some peculiar way of fixing drunks in 2 days. It takes you through the steps in 2 days and you never drink anymore and you have a good life. Now this
my good friends in AA and of AA, I feel I would be very remiss if I I didn't take this opportunity to welcome you here to Cleveland, not only to this meeting, but those that have already transpired. I hope very much that they have the presence of so many people, and the word that you have heard will prove an inspiration to you, not only to you, but may you be able to impart that inspiration to the boys and girls back home who are not fortunate enough to be able to come. In other words, we hope that your visit here has been both enjoyable and profitable. I get a big thrill looking over there to see your faces like this, with a feeling that possibly some small thing that I did a number of years ago played a small part in making this meeting possible. I also get quite a thrill when I think that we all have the same problem. We all did the same thing. We all get the same result in proportion to our zeal and enthusiasm and stick-to-itiveness. If you will pardon the injection of a personal note at this time, let me say that I've been in bed 5 of the last 7 months, and my strength hasn't returned as I'd like, so my remarks will of necessity be very brief. But there are 2 or 3 things that flash into my mind on which it would be fitting to lay a little emphasis. One is the simplicity of our program. Let's not louse it all up with Freudian complexes and things that are interesting to the scientific mind, but have very little to do with our actual AA work. Our 12 steps, when simmered down to the last, resolve themselves into the words love and service. We understand what love is, and we understand what service is. So let's bear those 2 things in mind. Let us also remember to guard that area number come. And if we must use it, let's use it with kindness and consideration and tolerance. And one more thing, none of us would be here today if somebody hadn't taken time to explain things to us, to give us a little pat on the back, to take us to a meeting or two, to have done numerous little kind and thoughtful acts in our behalf. So let us never get the degree of smart complacency so that we're not willing to extend or attempt to that help that has been so beneficial to us, to our less fortunate brothers. Thank you very much.
So, let's turn that into a question. Did you experience a craving for alcohol when you put alcohol in your body? Now, notice he says, and never occurs in the average temperate drinker. So let's say, out of 10 times that I drink, I do not experience craving 8 times. Am I an alcoholic? According to Dr. Silkworth, I am. You know why? Because he said it never. He doesn't say rarely. He doesn't say seldom. He says never occurs in the average temperate drinker. You see what separates me from the non-alcoholic? Has nothing to do with how many times I've been to jail. Has nothing to do with that. It has to do with one thing and only one thing. It's called the phenomenon of craving. I've had the opportunity of going out for business dinners with colleagues who drink, and sitting there and watching them drink, and they'll have 1 or 2. By the time they get the second drink, they push it away and they say something like, I better stop, I'm starting to feel it. Well, let's go then. Come on, let's get it on. I cannot relate to that. I've been asked that question multiple times through the years by colleagues and say, "Paul, I don't understand it. What separates you from me?" I don't have to go into this big old diatribe about, what I experienced in the 12 years and so on and so forth, and I found a sponsor who had big book sobriety and blah, 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 blah. I don't have to go into that. I tell them what phenomenon of craving. What do you mean? I put alcohol in my body. I crave more alcohol, and I can't stop. That's how I know that I'm an alcoholic. Consider this. You run into me at a meeting, and you hear me saying, "I choose to not drink today." When I say that, who am I saying has the power to keep me sober? Me. Who am I saying deserves all the credit? Me. So if I'm saying that, why am I here? You want to find out if a person's taken the first step as outlined in the big book? You only need to ask one question. Only one. Can you choose to not drink today? Stop and ask yourself that question. Can you just simply choose? See, the moment I begin thinking that I can choose to not drink, I've instantly deluded myself. Because I've convinced myself I have the power and that I'm going to deserve all the credit. Now, back here on page 25. Third paragraph. Page 25, paragraph 3. If you are as seriously alcoholic as we were, we believe there was no middle-of-the-road solution. We were in a position where life was becoming impossible. And if we had passed into the region from which there was no return through human aid, we had but two alternatives. One was to go on to the bitter end, blotting out the consciousness of our intolerable situation as best we could, and the other to accept spiritual help. So here the authors are telling me that there's only two alternatives. Either keep drinking, keep living the way I am, or seek spiritual help.
And now let me close with the Serenity Prayer by Reinhold Niebuhr. The Serenity Prayer in its entirety is the epitome and the essence of our spiritual philosophy and concepts. It places us in the now and assures us that if we strive to think and act in harmony with God's will, that we can trust Him to make all things right. Surely God is good. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardship as a pathway to peace, taking as He did this sinful world as it is, not as I would have it, trusting He will make all things right if I surrender to His will, that I may be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy with Him forever in the next. Amen.
Showing others who suffer how we were given help is the very thing which makes life seem so worthwhile to us now. Cling to the thought that, in God's hands, the dark past is the greatest possession you have, the key to life and happiness for others. With it, you can avert death and misery for them.
Prayer of St. Francis. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. O Divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled, as to console. To be understood, as to understand. To be loved, as to love. For it is in giving that we receive. It is in pardoning that we are pardoned, and it is in dying that we are born to eternal life.
This thought brings us to step 10, which suggests we continue to take personal inventory and continue to set right any new mistakes as we go along. We vigorously commenced this way of living as we cleaned up the past. We have entered the world of the Spirit. Our next function is to grow in understanding and effectiveness. This is not an overnight matter. It should continue for our lifetime. Continue to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. When these crop up, we ask God at once to remove them. We discuss them with someone immediately and make amends quickly if we have harmed anyone. Then we resolutely turn our thoughts to someone we can help. Love and tolerance of others is our code. So we clean house with the family, asking each morning in meditation that our Creator show us the way of patience, tolerance, kindliness, and love. The spiritual life is not a theory. We have to live it. The age of miracles is still with us. Our own recovery proves that. Chapter 5. How it works. Rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. Those who do not recover are people who cannot or will not completely give themselves to this simple program. Usually men and women who are constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves. There are such unfortunates. They are not at fault. They seem to have been born that way. They are naturally incapable of grasping and developing a manner of living which demands rigorous honesty. Their chances are less than average. There are those, too, who suffer from grave emotional and mental disorders, but many of them do recover if they have the capacity to be honest. Our stories disclose in a general way what we used to be like, what happened, and what we are like now. If you have decided you want what we have and are willing to go to any length to get it, then you are ready to take certain steps. At some of these we balked. We thought we could find an easier, softer way, but we could not. With all the earnestness at our command, we beg of you to be fearless and thorough from the very start. Some of us have tried to hold on to our old ideas, and the result was nil until we let go absolutely. Remember that we deal with alcohol, cunning, baffling, powerful. Without help, it is too much for us. But there is one who has all power. That one is God. May you find him now.